I think we are in great shape to get started. So thank you again to everyone for joining. Welcome to today's webinar, how Nissan streamlined global HR operations with ServiceNow and 3CLogic. Some quick housekeeping before I pass the mic over to our speakers today. So again, welcome. My name is Diana Del Solar. I'm part of the marketing team here at 3CLogic. First, today's session is being recorded. So if you'd like to share this out with colleagues later or watch back in your own time, we'll be sharing this recording with you by tomorrow via email. So I know people are always curious about that. So yes, we will be recording and you will receive that tomorrow. We will also have some time for questions and answers at the end, so a short Q&A session. So if questions are popping up as we go, you can use the QA chat box, and we'll answer those towards the end. So there'll be opportunity for that as well. From there, I'd love to pass the mic over to G and have you introduce yourself and our speaker today and take it from there.
Perfect. Thanks, Deanna, for queuing it up, and thanks to our audience for joining us today. So my name is Guillaume, G for short, for obvious reasons. I'm the Vice President here of Marketing and Alliances here at 3CLogic, but really the person that has taken time out of his busy day to join us, really the man of the hour. Our guest is none other than the VP of Global People Services at Nissan, Raju Vijay. Raju, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Guillaume and Diana. Great to be part of this audience and group, and looking forward to this engaged conversation. So I run Global People Services. Thanks for queuing that up. I run a function within HR, a sub-function within HR called People Services, which is our people empowerment, people enablement, and people engagement platform and operational platform for HR globally. I've been part of the Nissan world for about 23 plus years. The last 7 years as a full-time executive, trying to figure out a way to get one digital HR started in terms of our landscape on the cloud infrastructure, and also setting up our platforms on cloud. And about 3 years ago, I started on the path of HR operations, setting up centers globally. And then what you'll hear and see today would be an extension of some of those foundations that were set up under digital HR, and an extension into my operational elements with IVRs and such. So I'm excited about that. Nissan's a well-known brand. We are in 17 markets across 32 facilities. We are pretty much a global organization in the true sense of the word. My teams are truly global from an operational definition and also in the digital definition in terms of support structures. We support about 130 plus thousand employees globally. That's a combination of a lot of different things that come together. FTE count on those are about 93. And then we have our extended contingents, dealers, and other pieces that add up to that number that you see. Again, within HR, I manage operations globally, so employee engagement, and in a way to meet employees where they want to be met is a primary focus on in terms of experience and how we bring that balance of life between work and life and get that going is part of my mission and vision within the Nissan world. So look forward to this, Guillaume.
Likewise. And obviously, I mean, Nissan goes without, need for an introduction, but, getting into the details and sharing, just how big of an infrastructure, how large of an employee base you serve certainly provides some context. Obviously, in your role, and what we're going to talk about today, Raju, is really about the employee experience, right? Which in the last few years is, I'm not saying it wasn't a hot topic or an important topic before, but it's certainly become a central topic these days, because the employee workforce, how we work, and how employees engage with the organizations they represent is, well, it's quite literally going through some pretty significant changes, really to set the baseline. And I'm sure everyone who's watching can have an appreciation for what is the significance and what's the power of the employee experience. But it really hits on a lot of different important components, right? It hits the bottom line when it comes to profitability. It has an impact when it comes to employee retention. And we know that it's a lot easier to keep employees if they're happy than it is to find replacements. It hits on customer satisfaction, and it ultimately has a pretty significant impact, if done right, when it comes to just the productivity of the teams or the employees that make up an organization like that of Nissan. But in the case of Nissan, can you tell me a little bit more, or for the sake of our audience, share a little bit more about what is the employee experience? What are some of the initiatives that you guys are working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start with a very important verbiage that you see on the first bullet there, Ambition 2030. So back in the fall of last year, the CEO, Uchida-san, he declared our Ambition 2030 of where we want to head to from an electrification perspective, from a zero fatality footprint, from an ecosystem perspective, and what we do from an ESG and social and how we come to market doing some of those things. At the core of all of that definition is our employee set and an employee experience definition, which is no different than a consumer grade experience that we all have gotten to experience and enjoy, and should be no different than that same level of definition that we look at as an employee. Traditionally, as you walk into the office doors, you face green screens and other archaic environments. And I think it's been a transformational journey for us over the last 7 years and then prior, in terms of trying to figure out how do we get us to a better way of working, a better way of engaging, meeting employees where they need to be met. Not necessarily everything is self-service, not necessarily everything is something that can be done via emails. There's still a human interaction, a human touch as you talk of human resources and the engagement aspect of what that means. So how do you get us to a better plane where you get the time to spend time and energy on personal and sensitive things, but you're also able to then take the time away from things that are archaic and repetitive that you can do automation on. And how do you then strike a balance in that mix? And so that's a big portion of that experience. Again, creating the environment that is amicable to work-life balance, amicable to well-being, amicable to the work structure and enablement and the empowerment that happens. Once the enablement happens, the engagement happens. So that's at the core of that. And as part of this 7 years ago, when I started full-time with Nissan, we embarked on the digital HR journey, where we started laying the foundation for cloud-based environments at a global level across Nissan on the HR landscape. So I have worked there for all of my HRMS backend. I picked ServiceNow at the time, about 2 years into that, in terms of my employee engagement platform, and about a year and a half into getting us deployed in ServiceNow globally, we started on the path of a little more myopic definition of the touch points and the enablement definition from a 3CLogic perspective. So it's been a progression and a journey. And we couldn't do some of the things that we are doing today had we not laid the groundwork and the foundation that we needed to lay to be able to get us to this part. And it's no different than not wanting to get started on virtual agents and virtual chat if your human chat is not enabled right. If you're able to do the human chat right, you can then digitize that fact and get that to virtual chats. The buzzword today says get to virtual, get to the RPA definitions, but I think we need to walk and crawl and make sure we get the right steps in place. And I've been blessed and fortunate that my leadership and sponsorship in the Nissan world has enabled me to get that foundation laid in a way that we can then ramp up and then run from there on. So that's the holistic experience that we seek on the Nissan side, technology enabled, but also a balance that needs to be struck between where we want to have that hand-holding aspect of human touch and human relationship, and then the automation definitions that come with technology.
And we're gonna talk about that. But again, the foundation that you're referring to, right, that you started is what I believe you call Engage at Nissan, but foundationally that's built on the ServiceNow platform. That's the starting point that you built. And so let's talk about, like you said, this was a progressive phase by phase effort that started, with the basics and worked your way up to what we're going to cover today, which has to do with some of the things that you guys wanted to do as a next evolution. And this has to do more with the engagement aspect, right? You have the foundation built on ServiceNow, and you wanted to facilitate and streamline how your employees can engage, whether it's via self-service or whether it's with live agents. What does that experience look like, and how can it be complementary to the foundation you built on ServiceNow? So together, you and I, when we put together this presentation, we sort of came across or agreed on 4 key initiatives, if you will, challenges. And again, I say challenges as if once they're solved, they're done, but this is a perpetual ongoing effort.
Right.
The employee
Right.
experience is never finished, right? In terms of improvement.
Right.
One of the first things that at least I was educated on when you and I first met is that Nissan doesn't necessarily operate with a, using a traditional workforce as perhaps most of us are used to. Describe that a little bit for us.
Right. So 70% of my population is on the line on the manufacturing facility, and considered direct in terms of what we do on the ecosystem. The other 30% and a mix of that 30 between how we go to market ramps up into office space and knowledge workers and such. So the traditional 9 to 5, whatever timing we operate and run in, and the availability of queues and availability of agents and those definitions don't necessarily bode well with the Nissan population. So when you serve a population, one, at a global level, as we are in multiple footprints, language is a big definition that needs to be accounted for and considered. But time zone is clearly another one that we need to make sure we are all adhered to. So as a global organization, those are some of the things I normally look at when we look at how do you serve a population set that traditionally I would launch ServiceNow, get mobile up and running, but the planned worker on the line is supposed to leave his mobile phone in a locker before he gets into his line. So getting a mobile enabled platform doesn't necessarily do anything for that person unless he gets out on his shift. And at the time, everybody is out on the shift about the same time. How do you queue somebody and trying to get into what they need done? So self-service is important, meeting them where they need to be. It cannot be, let me call you back. Let me do things with you when your line is ready in queue. You won't lose your line in queue. None of those operate in the traditional world for me. So how do we then work to get some of that going differently? So that's one key thing. Phone is still a very primary method to communicate and converse. And that change management is huge because not everybody is carrying an office phone. Not everybody has got unlimited voice and data in the environments we're all living in, minus the US, where most of us today enjoy that set of benefits. So us assuming that is the case and people are able to use their cell phone is a bad starting point. And we don't understand what are those form factors we need to get to and how do we enable some of those pieces as we get down this path. So I think as we look at some of these things, and that's where the non-traditional aspects of things come in. We can deploy things at an indirect workforce, the knowledge workers, in a very traditional way. But as we get into the non-direct, the direct population, the non-traditional workforce, we need to start thinking innovative things or what we could be doing differently between kiosks and calling in at a particular time, or better enable self-service, or chat assistants and chat agents, and how would we think through some of those definitions? That's where, and I wouldn't necessarily call it a challenge, it's the opportunity. How do you think differently in terms of what you need to be doing with this audience and still get the benefit of technology and everything else that we need to go through? And that's part of what we go through as we look at deployments and the cycle times and how we operate and what we do.
Yeah, now obviously we at 3CLogic, we provide voice, SMS capabilities in complement to some of the digital channels that are native to the ServiceNow platform. And so one of the things that you alluded to is telephony is still a big piece of the equation, but telephony by itself, independent of what you've built foundationally on the ServiceNow platform, doesn't really work because it takes too long. It's not personalized. It doesn't necessarily have the flexibility to work around the non-traditional environment that Nissan has to account for. So notably, for example, one of the other things that I know Nissan was hoping to improve upon, or, you mentioned an opportunity to enhance, was everything around the interactive voice response, or traditionally the IVR, right? So to our audience, what's the experience when someone calls in? What are the options given to them? And to what extent can we perhaps optimize that experience, including, in addition to traditional IVR, I can skip to one of the other things, which is also, does everything always have to go to an agent, or are there voice-enabled self-service opportunities as well? Walk us through a little bit of those examples here, Raju.
Yeah, and the world I came from was an archaic IVR environment, complicated and complex, hard to maintain and manage, and the tree structures were extremely, extremely complex based on how we had set it up. So part of the low-hanging fruit definition, as we looked at our business case, looking at what we need to be doing, is to simplify that structure and no more than 3 clicks before you can get to either a person speaking or pointed response back to what you need to be doing from an answer back, right? So are we there yet? Probably not in all the instances. We are making good strides and good progress thanks to 3CLogic and the flexibility in defining some of the 3 and being able to do that on our side, right? Versus having to depend on somebody doing it for me in an iterative manner. So that's one low-hanging fruit that we captured and moved on to pretty quickly. And this is where we started. Now, there was no set of validation that we could do as somebody called in. There was no personalization based on who was calling in. And those are out of the box for me with 3CLogic, right? So we could come in, get the validation done, know who's calling in, know that there is an existing interaction happening with that person in ServiceNow, and then ask that question, are we calling in regards to this, or is it a new incident? And then at least there is a dialogue that is perpetual and ongoing. The other thing we did differently from a persona perspective was not have our executive VIP population go through the tree. So as soon as you validate somebody is flagged as a VIP customer on the ServiceNow profile side, we would directly flag them into an agent on live conversation with an agent and an experienced tier agent, right? So we could identify the tiers of agents and not have to go through multiple layers, but go to an experience definition. The time is valuable, the service needed to be at a different level, so we would be able to pass that through to that population very quickly, knowing who's calling in and what they're calling in for. So I think those were low-hanging fruits for me between the deployment of the tree structure, the IVR, but then more importantly, what we had realized over a period of time with our ServiceNow instances, when we started analyzing what are we getting calls on, password resets was a big one. So how do you then tackle that low-hanging fruit? So we would get the request in, the queue would say a password, and we could send them a link via SMS and saying, go address this link, click here, and get your password reset. So you're taking that time away from the agent from having to call, listen to the call, send them that FAQ document or point them to an FAQ document so they can go do the self-service. There was still an agent engagement, but we took that out, so the middleman is out. It's a direct response and it's a faster response. So those are some of the low-hanging fruits we picked on. We're still early in the journey with us in terms of where we need to go, what we need to do from an evolution perspective. But those are the things I would highlight in what the environment faced. We faced in the environment, how we solved some of those.
So if people call, can we balance between self-service and those requirements that are complex enough that they justify getting to a person, but not just any person, the right person? And again, all built on that ServiceNow foundation so that what the system they're calling through, in this case, of course, 3CLogic, has the context about the individual, everything that's known about them in ServiceNow, whatever, most recent tickets, current tickets, et cetera, so that you can personalize. And the idea is faster resolution, faster speed, speed of service,
right,
more efficient outcome for the agents. And then again, leveraging your human resources, because again, it's, relative to the team, they serve 130,000+ employees. It's a relatively lean and mean team, and they're able to get away with it with what we built. One of the other things I know that we talked about was reporting and analytics, right? That was another big ticket item that you guys were looking to potentially, again, as an opportunity, improve upon. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and I alluded to this. So the analysis on the data that I briefly mentioned in the previous segment, in trying to get to the low-hanging fruits on what do I need to solve, was very manual, right? We would go and comb through our ticket logs within ServiceNow. We don't use the ServiceNow analytical modules today, so we would pull an extract out of there and then reassign based on the queue definitions and aggregate what are they calling for, get some of that data in, and that's a manual process we all went through. It gave us the insights on where do we need to focus on, what we need to be doing. So as we sat down to deploy what we needed to do, we looked at some of that volume and said, those are the classic use cases we want to go tackle. And as we set forth with our first set of deployments with 3CLogic, we said, okay, let's look at password resets. Let's look at, I think the next one was payroll-related queries. Third one was the pieces around our VIP customers calling in, not having to go through the entire tree structure. The base foundational element was the tree in itself, trying to simplify the tree to 3 clicks and getting to an agent or a knowledge article or a knowledge base somewhere. So you're getting an answer done or a call back definition, right? So you wait in queue is too long. Let's just call you back. You won't lose your queue in line. So all of that kicked in. So, and I think this was a laborious manual task we did in terms of culling the data through ServiceNow, looking at what we need to focus on, where is the agent ramp up that needs to happen. And our industry is very cyclical as we go through what we do. Internally within the HR landscape is a very calendarized set of sequences we go through from performance and evaluations and merits. So we know the ebb and flow there, and we can point people in as we needed to based on some of that data, but it was just painful getting some of that insights out. Launching something like this, we now know where we need to focus on. We get some of that analytics out of this. And more importantly, I don't know if we're going to cover this, Guillaume, but one of the things is that is an opportunity to train the agent by monitoring and watching what's going on in the interaction. So an experienced agent monitors the newbie coming in that's on the line answering, but then there's a coaching element that comes in based on sentiment and other pieces that we can visualize and measure a little out of the box than what we are traditionally used to doing, but it's a great aid in trying to get us to the next level in terms of engagement, interaction, and how we need to be doing those things.
So we are going to cover that, and that's a good segue in terms of, so far we've covered sort of what are the things you're hoping to solve for. Obviously, in choosing 3CLogic, we're going to get into, okay, how did that come into? And the coaching was definitely a big one, right? And but to your point, when it comes to reporting and analytics, it wasn't that you didn't have access to the data. It's just that you were spending as much time combing through it as you were eventually reacting based on what it had to reveal, right? So you chose 3CLogic, right? No surprise. But it's really, at the end of the day, what how you leverage 3CLogic in combination with ServiceNow, right? So again, you built Engage at Nissan on ServiceNow. That's your foundational platform that you put together years ago, have been building ever since. And really the missing piece of the equation is if digital interactions and self-service are not for everyone because of the non-traditional workforce that we have, how can we then add in and optimize for that communication and engagement layer without ignoring everything you've put together foundationally on ServiceNow, right?
Right.
I know. So integration really was one of, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but integration was obviously one of the, and something that was ServiceNow centric was a big part of Nissan's and your team's decision in selecting 3CLogic, which goes ultimately to the integration. So let's talk about some outcomes here, right? So if we go in the order we started, we go back to those call trees, right? So you mentioned one of the issues was lack of personalization. You could build trees, but took time to build them, let alone change them. Mentioned you have a cyclical environment, so changes are expected, and you've been live since late June, right? So you're about 90 days in. And like you said, you're finding out a little bit about learning what you didn't know. And as a result, now you know where to put your efforts as a result of the deployment in the last 3 months. But talk about some of the impact. Let's start with the call flows here.
Yeah, so the vision we set ourselves and the goal we set ourselves, no more than 3 clicks. As you pick an idea and get to where we need to get to. So, and we are constantly looking at what is going to get us to there at an optimal level without sacrificing the service level that we need to be still providing and capturing enough in the interaction to be able to address it intelligently. So that was a lofty goal, and then we continue to progress down that path, and that required a fundamental change in how the tree structure really enabled itself. So a validation structure, and then immediately the options, and then getting you to either a knowledge base or an agent within 3 clicks is the goal and the vision, and we are constantly working to get that going. I said payroll early on is a big area for me as the direct and the indirects come in for validation of pay slips or invoices for lease cars that we do as employee leases, given our environment as Nissan. So, and I think a lot of that used to go into a generalized queue. We are now able to segregate that into individual definitions. Some of my payroll is outsourced, so you can actually bring somebody from the outside in to have that engagement done. It doesn't need to go through a Nissan entity and then reach out to outside and multiply the layers. So that's one aspect of shrinking the time and the timeliness and the effectiveness of that transaction. And then also being able to really understand the volumes. How do you then, so I'll give you a classic case. We had we had a little bit of a fire drill at the end of the year last year. And then after we launched, the 4th week into the launch, we had some lease vehicle invoices going into our retiree population. Now, they're not Nissan employees, they are retired from Nissan, but they are still eligible for Nissan vehicles in their lease program. And the invoices went in, and typically these people don't log in to engage at Nissan, which is my platform for engagement. So on 90 days, that platform will reverse and have you reset your password.
Right.
And if you have not used the system for 90 days, by my IT and info security rules. So when all these people came in and point them to a link, they hit the link and it said, reset your password. The link didn't work. And all they could read at the bottom was, call this number for the HR service center. So overnight, I saw my volumes ramp up to 1,300 calls back to back in terms of trying to get hold of an agent. Right. And we saw that coming early on as the call ramp up started. So we could deploy a lot more agents and also the folks on the office level onto some of those calls and divert those calls. And now we didn't necessarily get through the fire drill without stabs in the back. I'm not suggesting everything was just peachy and worked out, but we had a semblance of awareness that we wouldn't have otherwise had. And that was a good fire drill to get into with this whole thing. The reason why I bring that up, even though we didn't solve the problems of the reset in that domain, what we could immediately do was to say, put a note on that IVR and a message on the IVR early on saying that we are experiencing longer than expected wait times. Please be patient. Please leave us your number or shoot us an email to this address and we'll come back and call you back. Right. I wouldn't have been able to do that with my IVR in the past without going through several hoops of having to go adjust some of those things. But with 3CLogic, I was able to go get that message updated. People got the message. We still had disgruntled folks seeing the invoice when they saw them, but that didn't solve any of those. But at least there was a way out of what we needed to do and learn some of those lessons, right? So the next time something like this happens, we are prepared, the necessary stakeholders are engaged. I think a lot of the change in communication, everything chimes in, and then this will get to be second nature as we do some of these things.
And the point you made is you have the ability to do it yourself, right? There's need to go to IT resources.
Correct.
That's right. And are responsible for the employee experience. Right. So you might as well control what the experience is from the moment.
Shouldn't be. Right. Absolutely.
And of course, what you're alluding to is examples where you can say, hey, next time I think we know how we can apply self-service, right? And to take it through, you mentioned password reset requests, right?
Right. That was the highest volume calls coming into the center for me as the agent. That across my platforms, across my downstream application, not necessarily my global platform, but my downstream payroll and lease and other pieces of benefits that we do. And what we were able to do right off the gate when we went live in June was, as soon as we identified the tree branch as the password reset branch, we would then give them an option to say, I'm going to send you a link, and this is the link to go reset your password with a knowledge article link that says what steps you need to go through. And it was shot through as an SMS. Now, here's where the non-traditional way of working kicked in and said, nope, that SMS is not going to do anything because it's going to sit in my locker. And I'm not anywhere close to my phone, right? So we would do something different for the direct force, but a bulk of the stuff on the indirect side, the knowledge worker, they got the SMS, they were able to engage at that level, not wait for an agent, and the queues didn't go up. So I think that was a quick win for us that we were able to put in place, and it worked out really well for us. So good feedback and positive press in terms of where we are heading from an experience and enablement perspective.
And of course, all that gets tracked in ServiceNow. Just because it didn't reach an agent doesn't mean we're not creating an automatic incident.
Right, and that's important, Gil, because I think there are two modes of working in ServiceNow: the interaction phase, and then the conversion of that interaction into a case. So we still track everything at an interaction level with 3CLogic. As the call comes in, the agent assignment happens, we know what is going on at the interaction level. When it flips over to a case and a case gets assigned, I think we track the case against that interaction. So I think you're absolutely right. We do keep track of all of that happens, whether it's an SMS, whether it's somebody on a live agent coming in or somebody called in and dropped. So we can track all of those that happens in ServiceNow and then proactively come back and reach out to some of those.
Now you talk about engagement and you had sort of alluded to this. So we're going down into analytics. One of the things you're also interested in is, how to solve for what was ultimately a very manual effort when it came to just knowing how many engagements are we getting, of what type, what nature, how long are people holding, things of that nature, things that you would expect, any environment such as your own would measure. So really, there were two phases when it came to 3CLogic and what we lend to the analytical aspect, right? So one, which is your traditional call KPIs, how many calls, what type of call, the call recording being linked to the case or the incident, so you have easy access to it. You don't have to go searching for it in another system. And the other one, which you're about to go live here very shortly, which is also what you alluded to earlier, the call transcription, AI-powered sentiment analysis, ability to QA at scale. What is the quality of the engagement? Tell me a little bit about why that gets you excited and what that's done for you guys so far.
For the first time, it is real world, right? It's not anecdotal. It's not referential. It's not after the fact. So I've got an agent being monitored as the call flow happens and the conversation happens, the dialogue happens, and the system is able to tell me, where could I have done things differently in terms of a sentiment? Where am I seeing an anger coming in, an emotion coming in? I could address that emotion and tone that down to get into getting it back to where the engagement is really fruitful and meaningful. So I think that's what excites me. That's one part. The second part is just-in-time training, right? So as this goes through, it gives me an opportunity for now to go and have a mentoring and coaching relationship. So I'm building the next level of leaders and next level of agents that come in through the pipeline to be the next level leaders for me. I think they are learning on the job, but they're also progressing and getting the benefit of the learn from somebody that's experienced and knows based on real world facts what they could have done differently, or what would have worked better. How would be a response to something that they faced and could have handled it a little differently, right? So that excites me a lot, because I think a couple of things. One, you build a team that you need that is really engaged and working through what we need to be doing. But secondly, I think it's more real time. It's not archaic, it's not anecdotal, it's not after the fact. I think that's what excites me about that part. We are still in early stages on this one. This is something that we will launch into with our phase 2, but this excites me a lot. And as we look at the progression with this platform and what we need to be doing.
But from day one, you've got all your analytics in one universal dashboard. You can look at your call KPIs, your ServiceNow digital KPIs, your number of cases and tickets. All of a sudden, you've got an omni-channel administrative view of all the different engagements happening, both self-service, live agent, and anything in between. And the idea here is that you can spot those trends today. It's not a manual effort to have to go fishing for the problem. Now you can focus on reacting in the areas that are deserving. And to your point with analytics, now instead of just listening to a sample of calls, you're doing quality assurance across the entire engagement layer. And then you can focus on all the things that really deserve your attention. And of course, you can use automation and ServiceNow workflows to just, hey, Raju, here are the 5 calls that meet your criteria that you should really be aware of. Up to you to do what you do, but the key here is you should know first and foremost. Yeah. Very cool. So let's talk about some of the potential. I mean, I know we mentioned you guys are only 3 months in. We're already, as a result of all the things that we're learning as everything is being implemented, we're quickly finding additional new low-hanging fruit that we didn't know was there because we didn't know it was a problem to begin with, or an opportunity, as you so eloquently put it. But tell me a little bit about sort of where things are headed for you guys at Nissan, and what are some of the things that you are predicting are going to be most impactful when you look at what you've done foundationally on ServiceNow, what you're now foundationally building with 3CLogic and ServiceNow and beyond.
So I have operationally in the Nissan environment, I manage 3 global service centers in multiple geographies, Mexico City. For the Americas, I do Chennai for all of my AMEO region, including portions of Europe. And I've got a center in Budapest for GDPR related activities. I also additionally manage 3 satellite hubs within Thailand, in UK, Sunderland, and in Russia, in terms of the local language and everything else. The intention is to have 3CLogic deployed across all of those operating environments in how we engage and what we do. The engagement platform in all of these areas is engage a Nissan or ServiceNow for me, including Japan. And I didn't mention Japan specifically because that'll be one that we will come back into once we have deployed this in the first set of regions that I mentioned. America is the AMEO region, and then Japan comes in. So the first thing that excites me as I look at my roadmap and see what I need to be doing is a level of standardization and a level of experience that would bring that is consistent. So it's not a phone call in one place, it's not an email in another place, it's not 3CLogic in a third place, right? And it's not directly an engaged ticket in ServiceNow, right? So can they all come in through a single channel, but then get to optimal channels of being served, but at least point them through a single way of working. The nirvana for me is, irrespective of whether I'm engaged in Nissan or 3CLogic or Workday or wherever I am, the process needs to take me to where I need to go. And all of the other pieces just ebb and flow in the right integrated way that we need to work as seamlessly as we can. So the person doesn't need to know they are actually engaged in ServiceNow or they're calling using IVR and 3CLogic, right? So these are the heroes behind the scenes, but the experience happens seamlessly across the board as we thread this through what we need to do. And that's what we are trying to get done. So integration was important and seamless integration was important. So I didn't want to build something on my side and then test it out. It came out of the box, it worked, it was perfect. It used the profile, I was able to log and get things moving, and the deployment was smooth. So, and that's what I'm expecting that we'll, and partnering with 3CLogic with my backends like Workday and ServiceNow, I know that that integration is going to be managed, maintained, and continuously evolving, right, as new features come in. So I'm not waiting for something new to be built. Oh, but if only this was there, so let me go spend money building it. It's coming into the product set. So that's important. So front and center, Ambition 2030 asks for employee experience as a stated goal. And this platform gives me that ability to go take me to that experiential level and at least address at the enablement and engagement level. So which is important and key. I would, as much as I would like everybody to call and talk to me, I would rather they do what they need to be doing, and everything that they need to do from an operational perspective is seamless. The least amount of time that they spend trying to get what they need to get out of the conversation, and where it needs to be a sensitive conversation, a human hand and a human touch, that's where I need to optimally spend time. So how do I get there? The work's not going away, but how do I work smart and not hard is the definition I seek to always look at. So where can I automate? Where can I repeat? That's an area I want to focus on. That's giving me the time to go put against things that I still need to do from a human touch perspective. So that's the balance I seek as we look at some of these things. And obviously, we talked about the tree and the flows. The 3 clicks is key for me. And if we can get to that nirvana, that promised land, I think we all will elevate our game from an experience perspective in a really robust way.
Excellent. Well, I mean, and not to steal a show here a little bit, but you mentioned about, staying ahead of the curve and releasing things. Obviously, you may have noticed we just announced our integration with ServiceNow's native virtual agent, so that you can use that in voice-enabled use cases. So just another example. I do want to switch over here and give our audience a chance for some Q&A, just to sort of launch it a little bit. Taking a step back, I mean, you've been doing this for a while, right, Raju? I'm just kind of curious, right? We've talked about sort of the tactical, but when you look at the strategic, and you look at some of the trends that obviously are impacting just the whole concept, the whole topic around employee experience. What is your take on technology and its perpetual role in employee experience? It seems to be, it's going to be a crucial tool moving forward, or what's your input there?
Yeah, I think the past 3 years, 2.5 years have really proven to be a good test of what technology can do, but also a reminder that that's not the only way to go do things. I think the balance and what we all seek in our day-to-day world and day-to-day environment, right from safety on to well-being and everything else in between, right? So clearly technology proved beyond any measure of doubt that things can be done without physically being present. And it's proven again and again. And in my global role with my team sitting across the globe, this was second nature. And this is how we operated. This is what we did. even prior to the 2020 launch of March, the pandemic and everything else that we went through. But prior to 2020 March, I traveled close to 400,000 miles a year in being in locales and being in locations. In the last 2.5 years, I haven't traveled any. And I still been able to do what I needed to do, and thanks to technology. But here comes what you don't want to take away from the enablement of technology is the need for that human touch, is the need for that engagement, is the need for that handshake at a point in time. And I think we started to realize that, and we are easing into it a little. We are not ever going to go back to the old ways of 400,000 miles, but at the same time, I think a little bit of presence is important, a little bit of that immediate definition is important. Otherwise, what we realized was your eco center across the environment and in your job and in your enterprise was your first line manager. So leadership skills became extremely critical in terms of what he or she needs to do to better manage that population, where you are the window for everything into the back of the organization. So I think there are some very clean lessons learned in how do you enable some of these things, how do you handle things that we never thought we would be able to do the things. We never had done those things that we had to do in the last 2.5 years. But we are resolute. We came through it. We learned through how to operate and what we need to do. Given our planned environments, we were all back in the plans back in September when nobody else was back into the office or back to work, I should say. So it's interesting, that evolution, but technology clearly plays a very pivotal role, but the human touch is absolutely essential and necessary. And anything that you do to manage and build that is going to be critical.
Yeah. All right. So we had a couple questions. One that I can answer, which is, are we going to do a demonstration, a live demonstration today? Or not? That's a whole different topic. It requires an entire different session, but I'll very shortly provide a way to contact the 3CLogic team. And if you're interested in having a live demonstration or getting a sense of how this might, potentially complement what you guys have or would be looking to solve for, the 3CLogic team would be more than happy to facilitate that. Great question.
Our contact info on the following slide, I
Yep,
believe.
we'll bring that up.
Yeah.
I'll do that right now. But perhaps one great question, perhaps one that we'll end it with, given our time here. Raju, this is to you. What was your biggest lesson learned after implementing the solution? I think that's a great way to sort of cap today's discussion. And again, here's our contact information for those who be interested in seeing a live demonstration. But what's your biggest lesson, Raju, so far?
So, and I go back to the non-traditional ecosystem that I deal with, right? So it's great to put presentation and charts and business cases that talk about first-time resolution, technology-enabled resolution callbacks, and all those wonderful things. It worked for 30% of the population, just perfect for me. And the moment we started looking at the direct population, and we said, let me call you back, and they said, you cannot, because I'm not on my phone. We need to rethink what we do with this population, right? So I think that was an aha moment. And historically, they have called, we have never enabled at a technology definition in that population said, but this is where the partnership with 3CLogic, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody in the audience who wants to talk and do deeper dives with me. I'll be happy to do that with you guys. But what I have with ServiceNow is not a transaction. I think this is a partnership where we are able to think differently and react differently to how we want to be addressing populations that are not traditional. How do we then enable some of those in different ways of working and engaging? And I think that was a big lesson learned for me. Again, with my population size and set, and I'm probably preaching to the choir, if people have deployed multiple global environments and systems, this is not a big bang in any stretch of the imagination. It has to be taken in bite-sized chunks, but a lot of change management, a lot of communication, a lot of good PR in terms of material in preparation for what is the new world going to look like. And don't just drop it into somebody and say, click the 3 buttons, you'll get to somebody. Trust me, you'll get. The trust me part is a dangerous slope to go into if it doesn't work. So make sure you do that change, put that out there, talk to people, get your ambassadors lined up, and it's a pleasant experience. And pick a time that's a low time where you know volumes are not going to be high. So you can test it out in real world as you start perfecting. So we picked the summer when the shutdown happens in the plant for 2 weeks. We launched right prior to that week. And then we eased everybody into it when they came in. They had a refresh set. They had all the trainings and videos and the PRs that happened. And it was a smooth and seamless experience. Those should be some lessons learned for me.
The luxury of being able to do it yourself. It's not you don't have to, bring in external IT resources to do it.
Right.
Right. And building it on platform using ServiceNow operational handlers, our embedded IVR and things of that nature. So you can do it in a 2-week period because it's not a build effort. It's a trial period, right? While you're
right.
Well, I promised Deanna that we wouldn't run over, so I'm going to end it on that question. For those of you who have additional questions, you can always reach us at info@3CLogic.com. If you have questions for Raju, I'd be happy to forward them on your behalf. If you'd be interested in having a discussion about how 3CLogic and our cloud call center and SMS platform could be right for you, you can reach us at info@3CLogic.com or at ServiceNow@3CLogic.com. Again, Raju, on behalf of everyone, myself included, our audience, thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, like you mentioned, you used to travel quite a bit. Now we have time to have these types of sessions with you. But nonetheless, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for joining us. To our audience, thank you for taking the time out of your day to learn a little bit more about what Raju's done with the 3CLogic platform and ServiceNow. Look forward to being in touch in the future.